Imagine waking up to the world on fire, not metaphorically, but literally. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the man who has controlled the fate of millions for decades, is gone, killed in a bold, coordinated US and Israeli strike. Yes, you heard that right. The most powerful, untouchable figure in the Middle East, eliminated in a single, unprecedented operation that has already sent shockwaves across the globe. But how did it happen? Why now? And what does this mean for you, for your country, and for the fragile balance of the world we thought we understood? Stay with me, because in the next 25 minutes, I'll break down every explosive detail, every high stakes decision, and every ripple that this strike is creating from Tehran to Washington to Jerusalem, exposing secrets that world leaders hoped you'd never see. If you believe the world is safer when truth is hidden, you're about to be shaken. But if you're ready to see the real story, here's the full truth. Before we dive in, hit that like button. It's more than a click. It's a signal that you want real, unfiltered news. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next shocking update. And I want you to do something simple. Type the word peace in the comments. Tell me which country you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Because this story touches every corner of the globe, and I want to see the world's response live, raw, and human. Now, let's set the stage. Khamenei was more than a leader. He was a symbol, a force, and a shadow looming over Iran and beyond for decades. Under his rule, the country survived wars, sanctions, protests, and secret operations, always projecting power far beyond its borders, influencing governments, fueling conflicts, and terrifying adversaries. He was untouchable, surrounded by layers of security and secrecy. Yet in the dead of night, a strike shattered the aura of invincibility, creating a vacuum that nobody saw coming. Picture the tension, the fear, the disbelief in Tehran as news spread. The contrast is staggering. A man who once seemed immortal, now gone in an instant, and the world left scrambling to understand the chaos. I'll take you through the rise and reign of Khamenei, the precise intelligence and strategy that made this strike possible, the immediate global reactions, and the long-term consequences that could rewrite the rules of power in the Middle East. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand what happened, but you'll feel the weight of it, the tension, the curiosity about what comes next, and the emotional depth of a moment that history will remember. So buckle up, because what you're about to see will challenge what you think you know, stir emotions you didn't expect, and maybe, just maybe, change the way you see the world forever. Before the thunderous explosions, before the world woke up to disbelief and horror, there was a long, slow boil, a tense cauldron of geopolitical rivalry that had been simmering for decades. To understand why this strike happened and how it could possibly culminate in the death of one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East, you have to go back to the unending story of distrust, fear, and competition between Tehran, Washington, and Jerusalem. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was not just a political leader. For 37 years, since 1989, he was the beating heart of the Islamic Republic's ideology, a man who fused spiritual authority with supreme political power, guiding a nation through wars, isolation, nuclear standoffs, and proxy conflicts that stretched from Iraq to Yemen. The tension was never just about Iran's nuclear program, though that was always a central charge. It was about influence and fear. Fear that Iran's deepening nuclear capabilities would give it leverage to dominate a region already fraught with fault lines and influence over militant groups that have clashed with U.S. allies and partners for years. It was the clash of two visions, one led by the West, pushing for containment, restriction, and balance, the other led by Tehran, pushing for sovereignty, expansion, and strategic depth through its proxy alliances. Every sanction, every negotiation, every missile test, and every skirmish was a chapter in this escalating saga. In the backdrop to all of this was a simmering hostility that never extinguished. The U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal years ago, imposing a rigorous sanctions regime that cut into Iran's economy and heightened the sense of siege in Tehran. Every breakthrough attempt at diplomacy ended in stalemate, further hardening both sides. Israel repeatedly described Iran's ambitions as an existential threat, not just in the distant future, but now. Iran reciprocated with rhetoric that painted Israel as an illegitimate entity and a destabilizing force. The rhetoric alone was enough to stoke anxieties across capitals around the world. Then came the final weeks before the strike, a surge in saber-rattling and military posturing that overtook diplomatic channels. Missiles were launched and intercepted, coalition forces were repositioned, and intelligence warnings circulated behind closed doors. The tension in 2025 and into early 2026 was not just a whisper of conflict. It was an overt crescendo of warnings, threats, and postures that signaled something far more dramatic was brewing. For U.S. and Israeli policymakers, the calculus seemed to shift. Iran was no longer just a threat contained at the edges. It was a threat that, left unchecked, could flood into every corner of the Middle East with devastating ferocity. The belief took hold that a bold surgical strike, a decapitation strike, might disrupt Iran's strategic cohesion and prevent an even larger catastrophe. What was once unthinkable became a calculated risk, the elimination of the supreme leader himself. Within this context of rising tensions, fear, and repeated cycle of action and reaction, the stage was set for a moment that would shock the world. Then came the early morning of February 28th, 2026, a date that will be etched into the annals of history with an almost surreal sharpness. In the pre-dawn hours, when the world was mostly quiet, skies over Tehran lit up not with sunrise but with explosions. This was not a random strike. This was a meticulously planned, comprehensive military operation, in which both the United States and Israel unleashed a wave of airstrikes targeting key strategic sites across Iran, with the central purpose of decapitating its leadership and disabling its military infrastructure. There's no subtle way to say it. The strike was massive. Jets roared, missiles streaked through the air, and high-precision ordnance hit command compounds, missile bases, and crucial military installations. The planning phase alone would have taken months. Months of satellite imagery, signals intelligence, infiltration of human sources, cyber reconnaissance, and strategic coordination between Washington and Jerusalem. Analysts watching from afar could see the tension, but what unfolded was far bigger than any leaked intelligence could convey. The target list was clear: disrupt Iran's command structure, remove its senior military officials, and most importantly, eliminate Ayatollah Khamenei himself. The operation struck so many critical sites in such rapid succession that Iranian air defenses were overwhelmed, unable to mount an integrated response in time. Leaders and commanders who might have thought themselves safe in underground bunkers or remote compounds were taken off guard by the sheer scale and precision of the offensive. According to official statements released shortly after the operation, President Trump confirmed that the strike succeeded in killing Khamenei and numerous other senior figures aligned with the Iranian leadership. He described the operation as a decisive blow to the regime's core and framed it as a necessary step in curbing Iran's regional threats and nuclear ambitions. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also reported strong evidence that Khamenei had been neutralized, with striking language that underscored the strategic weight he believed this operation had achieved. Within hours, eyewitnesses and footage from Tehran revealed plumes of smoke rising from the center of the city, where Khamenei's offices and residences once stood. The operation was not just a strike, it was an eruption, a moment of rupture that shattered decades of political continuity. The world watched in shock, many questioning whether this was retaliation, preemption, or something much more profound. The deliberate removal of a sitting head of state in an era that had promised war was an outdated relic. Instead, here it was, a kinetic gambit with historical implications that no scholar, politician, or citizen could ignore. When news of such magnitude first breaks, confusion is almost inevitable. In this case, initial reports were contradictory, with one side claiming holdouts and defiance while others insisted the unthinkable had happened. In the hours immediately after the strike, Iranian state media initially insisted that Khamenei was alive, directing operations and remaining firm in his command. This was a typical fog of war moment, a psychological reflex in Tehran to maintain an image of control even as the ground beneath was shaking. Then came the official confirmation, not from the US or Israel, but from Iran's own state media outlets. In a solemn broadcast, Iranian television announced that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had indeed been killed, declaring a 40-day period of mourning across the country. The announcement was emotional, heavy, and laced with the gravitas of a nation suddenly bereft of its most powerful figure. Flags were draped in black, clerics spoke of martyrdom, and citizens were urged to grieve. This confirmation mattered, not just because it ended speculation, but because it came from the very institutions that had previously denied the claims. It elevated the reports from battlefield rumor to incontrovertible fact. And yet, even as the official word came, there lingered a chilling tension in the global media. Was this a manipulated announcement? Was the regime attempting to control a narrative that was still unfolding? Independent correspondents emphasized the importance of independent verification, relying on satellite imagery, open-source analysis of destruction, and confirmation from multiple unrelated news agencies before declaring the event as verified. In times of war, facts often come wrapped in layers of propaganda, denial, and strategic framing, making the job of truth-seeking both vital and perilous. Even national capitals far from Tehran were trying to reconcile what had happened. Intelligence briefings were being updated in real time. Security advisories were issued. The economic markets, in some cases, reacted to the news with volatility. And civilians around the world struggled to process what the death of such a powerful leader meant for an already fragile global balance of power. Confirmation transformed the abstract into reality, a sudden, irreversible turning point from speculation to the stark reality of a changed world. To strike at a nation's leadership, especially one as protected and encased in defensive systems as Iran, is not a simple military decision. It's a strategic gamble, a high-risk, high-reward move that requires not just brute force, but surgical precision. intelligence superiority, and logistical mastery. Modern warfare is no longer about lines of troops on a battlefield. It's about information, timing, and exploiting tiny windows of opportunity that can alter the course of history. Precision strikes on high-value targets depend on multi-layered intelligence. Human sources on the ground, intercepted communications, satellite surveillance, and even cyber-enabled reconnaissance. It's one thing to locate a building. It's another to determine when a specific individual will be within it. That requires months, sometimes years, of intelligence fusion and predictive analysis. In this operation, the combined efforts of U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies, working with advanced tracking systems that can monitor movement, communication signatures, and behavioral patterns, appear to have pinpointed a vulnerability in an otherwise secure network. Then comes the coordination of the strike itself. Avoiding total regional escalation while conducting a decapitation strike demands an extraordinary level of precision, restraint, and synchronization. Radar avoidance, low observable aircraft, standoff missiles, and timed wave attacks all play a role in ensuring that air defenses cannot mount a coherent response. Yet, even with all this planning, the risk was immense. Attacking a heavily fortified capital with surface-to-air missiles, anti-air systems, and mobile defense batteries is like threading a needle in a hurricane. One miscalculation could have ignited a full-blown aerial confrontation, dragging neighboring states into a broader conflict. It's likely that stealth technologies, drones, and cyber disruptors were part of the initial wave, softening defenses, blinding radar sites, and creating openings for the main strike force. The psychological intensity of such an operation cannot be understated. Operators tasked with executing a mission of this magnitude carry not just the weight of millions of lives affected, but the burden of reshaping the geopolitical landscape in an instant. To strike the supreme leader's compound, a location fortified and repeatedly hardened against threats, is the epitome of tactical audacity. And yet, there's a deeper strategic dimension here. A leadership removal is not just military, it is psychological warfare. It sends a message that no one is beyond reach, no fortress is impenetrable, and no era of dominance is permanent. Whether this was a wise strategy or a reckless escalation will be debated for generations, but the very fact that it was executed reveals a new era in modern conflict, one where precision, courage, and unprecedented intelligence collaboration can topple giants overnight. The moment Khamenei's death was confirmed, the world reacted not with silence, but with an explosive mixture of grief, anger, defiance, celebration, and fear. In Iran itself, state officials quickly pledged revenge, describing the killing as a crime against humanity and declaring that the nation's response would be severe. President Masoud Pezeshkian publicly vowed that it was Iran's legitimate duty and right to retaliate against those responsible, setting the tone for a titanic struggle in the days to follow. Tens of thousands of mourners poured into the streets of Tehran, chanting and crying, some fallen to their knees in sorrow, others burning flags in fury. Clerics called on the nation to unite, transforming grief into a rallying cry against external enemies. At the same time, Iranian forces launched missile and drone attacks toward U.S. and Israeli assets in the region, a stark reminder that even in death, the supreme leader's legacy of conflict remained alive. In Washington and Jerusalem, the tone was starkly different. President Trump described the operation as a necessary action, a formidable blow to a regime he depicted as a global menace. Israeli leaders echoed this view, calling it a strategic success and claiming it weakened Iran's capacity to project power or develop destabilizing weapons. This contrast between mourning and celebration revealed an emotional and ideological split that many experts had always cautioned could be catastrophic, if ever fully unleashed. Elsewhere, world powers responded with urgent statements. Some condemned the strike as a violation of international law and a dangerous escalation. Others called for de-escalation and restraint. Russia and China, for example, condemned the attack and warned of broader instability, framing it as a dangerous precedent that undermines global norms. In contrast, some Western allies expressed cautious support for the necessity of containing Iran's influence, even as they stressed the need for diplomatic channels to prevent further expansion of the conflict. Meanwhile, in countries across the Middle East and beyond, civilians were left grappling with uncertainty. Oil markets fluctuated, travel advisories spiked, fears of broader regional war began to pervade everyday conversations from capitals to rural towns. Ordinary people found themselves caught between the geopolitical ambitions of world powers and the grim reality that ancient rivalries and new technologies had collided in a way that could reshape the 21st century. This was not just a military engagement, it was a psychological shock. It forced every government, every strategist, and every citizen to ask, what happens next? And who pays the price for this seismic shift? As the smoke settles over Tehran and the world slowly comes to terms with what has happened, one thing is crystal clear. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead, and the era he commanded with an iron fist has abruptly ended. What remains uncertain, however, is the true scale of the consequences. Will Iran's military and political apparatus crumble under the shock of his absence? Or will a new leader emerge, more ruthless, more unpredictable, and more dangerous than anyone expects? The answers are hidden in the corridors of power, behind the veils of secrecy, and in the tense whispers of those now jockeying to fill a vacuum that nobody can fully anticipate. I want you to pause for a moment and imagine the world in the days and weeks ahead. Imagine the silent calculations in war rooms, the decisions being made under pressure, the human lives intertwined with the abstract chessboard of strategy. Now, I want you to be part of this conversation. Hit the like button if you want real, unfiltered analysis and updates as this story develops. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next breaking chapter in this unfolding saga. And in the comments, type the word peace. Tell me which country you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now, because your voice, your perspective, and your presence matter in a moment that is changing the world. The death of Khamenei is not just news. It is a turning point. It is a story of power, risk, and human consequence. And as this story continues to unfold, we will watch, analyze, and question every move, every decision, and every ripple that spreads from this seismic strike. Stay with me. The world as we know it has shifted, and the next chapter is just beginning.